I think some of you are a little bit dense about this book and don't really understand what is the meaning behind this and what is the main point of this story. Because if you don't like this book or you think that this book doesn't make sense, it's probably more on you than it is on the author. Not gonna lie. Hello everyone, this is Darkest Hour Reads, and today I will be reviewing If We Were Villains by ML Rio. And I will have to say first, there's a lot we need to discuss. There's this book, even though it's quite tiny, it's packing a lot of information and a lot of things that are quite subliminal. So apologies beforehand for this long video. I already know that this is going to be a long video. So yeah, just buckle up and enjoy this discussion of every theater's kid wet dream. Before we start, I want to make a trigger warning, or I want to mention some trigger warnings from this book. There are mentions of violence, of domestic violence as well, of violence in general, of murder, what else? Or drugs and drinking and alcohol. So just take into account that if you are too young for these things, or if you get triggered by these topics, please A, don't read this book, and B, don't watch this video as well. There's plenty of videos that you can watch on my channel, but if you get triggered by these sentences or by these mentions of these topics, please take into account that we will talk about this. We will have a discussion about this. And now, starting with the discussion, obviously we always start with making a small summary of the plot, of the main plot of the story. Then we will discuss, I will discuss certain topics about within the book that I thought were very interesting. And then obviously, as always, I will make a small analysis and then give my opinion. Take into account that my opinion is only mine. If you don't agree with my opinion, or if you don't agree with my analysis or my discussion, please always feel free to comment, and feel free to just message me on my social media or comment. Just contact me on my DMs as well. We can have a nice discussion if you want, or if you just are upset in general about my opinion or my analysis and you don't think we can have a nice discussion, there's no point in really messaging me or commenting, because I don't want to get into fights or into arguments for a book that I thought it was good, but I don't really care that much about. Like, I'm not gonna fight you on your opinion on this book. Fair enough. Starting with the plot of this book. So If We Were Villains, for those who don't know, is the story about Oliver, the main character, who leaves prison after 10 years of imprisonment for a crime that we don't really know at the start of the book. And then he meets up with Detective Colborne, or former Detective Colborne, who was the lead detective or the lead investigator for the crime that was committed at that time. And then along the story, we find out what was the crime that he committed, and basically he explains the whole story to the detective, just because the Colburn actually asks Oliver, because this is the one crime that he thinks that doesn't add up, that even though he got written confession and Oliver confessed everything that he did, he is still quite confused about what happened around the crime, and what really happened, and what was the situation that actually made and what trickled down to the crime in general. Regarding the main story of the book, which is basically the story of what was the crime, basically we find that Oliver is a fourth-year student in Delica. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but yeah, it's Delica Classical Academy. So he is a fourth year in classical acting, if I am not mistaken, which is basically actors that study or that specialize in classical plays, like Shakespeare, for example, or classical Greek tragedies, for example, or comedies. Those are the main things that they specialize as actors, right? Like, for example, with accents or with certain specific things and topics that come within classical literature or classical theater. So he is one of the he's one of the 7 students within the fourth year of that of classical acting in general. And then obviously because the year what the year is so small, there's only 7 of them. They are all very, very close within each other. So that's when we find or we meet the other 6 characters. So we have Oliver, who is the main character. Then we find James, who is what's his name? Who is Oliver's best friend. Then we find Alexander, who is also very close with each other. Richard, Meredith, Philippa, and Ren. I hope I'm pronouncing all the names correctly. Philippa and Ren's name are always quite confusing. Maybe it's just me, or maybe I'm just pronouncing it correctly, whatever. But yeah, they are the 4 year students of Delicate Classical Academy in classical acting, and they are very close with each other. They are basically best friends, and they spend all their time together. The main story starts with the school year, so around September more or less, and it's basically they come back from summer, and it's just them finding out that the first assignment or the first play that they have to act in is Macbeth. And obviously for some reason, which I would never understand, but for some reason there are certain plays within Delica's classical academy. There's certain plays that basically they tell you as a student, they tell you what play is going to be, but you won't find out what character you play until literally like weeks before. So you have to prepare as soon as possible, and you don't know what other people are playing or what other students are playing. So basically you just prepare your own thing and then you just show up, right? Which I think is it seems quite good, like quite fun, but in practice as an actor, I don't think it's realistic for you to or for you to expect your students to actually make a good play out of someone that they haven't prepared with, right? Taking into account that Macbeth or like any sort of classical play, even all plays in general, you need to prepare with your other teammates or your other fellow actors to ensure that things are running smoothly, which I think is quite crazy. But yeah, in general, that is how Delica Classical Academy finds like the good role talent, right? Like you just prepare your own thing and then you see how you interact with other people, and then they rate you on that. And basically they find out that they are playing Macbeth, and it's one of the plays where they don't know what the other characters are playing, and they have to they rehearse it during September to October, and then in Halloween night, they just show it to other students and other people that just come and see the plays. I think something that is also quite interesting about this academy in general, or like the way that the way that the writer or the author wrote these scenes and these situations, and is that basically even though they have been actors for 4 years and they have probably the vast majority of the characters have been playing for ages since they were children, but for some reason Oliver, the main character, always mentions how all the characters usually play the same roles, like within the same type of role. So for example, Oliver always plays the kind of character that is always on the side, so like secondary characters that are supporting characters, and they always find like all his characters or all the characters that he plays are usually characters that are confronting within their own morals and like what is happening, but like their sense of loyalty. So he always finds the same character, like this same type of character that makes other people shine, whereas like all the other characters, so James, Alexander, Richard, Meredith, all of them play different types or different roles of characters, if you know what I mean. So after doing the first auditions for Macbeth, obviously they do individual auditions, and everyone just goes at a certain specific time, so they don't meet with each other, right? Obviously. Oliver goes to do his first audition, and then he just like goes back and have some like dinner or some drinks with the other six characters, and then they all receive a letter with the name of the character that they would play in Macbeth. And Oliver obviously expects a very specific character that really, really fits into the roles that he usually plays. But then when he opens the letter, he finds out that he's Banquo from Macbeth. I hope I'm pronouncing the names correctly again. I'm not an expert in Shakespeare, and obviously all the Shakespearean novels that I have read, or all the plays that I have read, which are not many, I actually read them in Spanish. So please take into account that I could be pronouncing the names really, really wrong, and I apologize for that. If you see that I'm mispronouncing it, please leave it on the comment. I want to make sure that I pronounce them correctly. But yeah, Oliver plays Banquo, and then he starts realizing that everyone seems to be playing different characters that they are not used to, and this is where the problem starts, right? This is where the drama within all the group of seven starts, because obviously taking into account that Oliver is very comfortable with these kind of characters, or the characters that he plays. The fact that he's playing Banquo means that all his other friends will play different things, and basically they see how Richard, one of the main characters, I would say, yeah, he's one of the main characters. He slowly sees how Richard, one of the main characters, starts behaving very erratically, and unlike him. So obviously he tries to speak with the other friends, with Meredith, for example, who is Richard's girlfriend, or Ren, who is Richard's cousin, or they try to speak one within each other to see what is wrong with Richard, who not only is getting violent, not only is getting erratic in general, and his behavior seems to be way different than out of the blue. Also, he's getting very violent, not only with James, who is one of the characters, but also with Meredith, who is the girlfriend. And obviously, after playing Macbeth, everything seems to be stabilizing a little bit. They have some drinks, and it gets quite crazy, and he gets really, really violent. And then obviously they decide not to do anything, not to involve teachers, not to involve anyone, just because they consider that this is something that they have to handle by themselves, right? Because they are the closest group ever. They are friends. They have been friends for years. They know each other, and they need to handle the things themselves, right? After Macbeth, they find out that they are playing Julius Caesar, which is also, again, one of the other plays of Shakespeare. All of the plays that you will see, that you should see in this book, are from Shakespeare, just because they are specializing in Shakespeare in general. But yeah, basically they play Julius Caesar, and obviously Richard, who is a very charismatic and very, very strong kind of person, he ends up playing Caesar. And so it's when Richard gets to play Macbeth. Well, he doesn't play Macbeth, but he starts preparing for the play of Macbeth. We start seeing how Richard starts behaving erratically, but the moment he gets the role of Julius Caesar, that is when we see how violent he actually is, and how much of a tyrant he is. And then one night, after a lot of drinks, after a lot of other substances, and after a huge drama that goes around Richard, Meredith, and Oliver, because Oliver actually sleeps with Meredith, because, well, there's a lot of things. You can read the book. But yeah, after all this drama going around, Oliver and Meredith are woken up at like 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in the morning by Philippa, and they just basically go down their residence, which is called the castle. They go down to the lake, and they find Richard just almost dead. He is groaning and like slightly crying, like barely conscious, like in the river, not in the river, in the lake. And you see, like they see him like with the arms like completely in different positions. His eye socket is just like gone. And obviously they see him, and Oliver tries to help him, so gets into the lake to try and help him. But everyone else stops him and and they have a discussion, a very heated discussion about what should they do with Richard. Obviously, after what happened during the night where Richard got really violent and he was making attempts to kill or to just basically hit someone, Oliver and Meredith, and just basically being a completely erratic person and being way out of himself and just really being fully uncontrollable for months. They decide all together that they are not going to help him, and Richard ends up drowning. Obviously, even though all the characters at that moment really, really hated Richard just because of all the hell that they have experienced with him becoming a tyrant, right? And but still at the same time they feel guilt and they are upset about the fact that their friend Richard, or boyfriend or slash cousin, that Richard has passed away. But obviously, because they are all involved more or less into his murder, into him passing away, they decide to cover each other up and just keep this secret within themselves, which afterwards along the line of the book we find that is something that consumes them. Even though they try to be themselves, they try to just graduate and try to do the plays as they normally would have, we see slowly that each character is filled with guilt, and it just basically like explodes in their faces, basically. After that long ass summary, I swear to God, I didn't expect it to be this long. But yeah, after that long summary, and now I'm going to do an analysis and discussion of the book in general. Please take into account that, again, I'm not an expert in Shakespearean literature or theatre in general. I am not an actor. I am a science person. Well, I'm a science girly. But yeah, please take into account that I'm not an expert and I could be very wrong. I've tried to do as much of an analysis and research that I could. And I think I have roughly an idea of some of the plays of Shakespeare, especially the ones that come into this book. But yeah, please take into account that I'm not an expert. When I was doing the research for this video, I noticed that there were a lot of mixed opinions about the book in general, which obviously it makes sense. It's fair. It happens all the time. You can't expect people to just like the book or just love it or just hate it. Like, obviously, all different opinions are valid. But I was very confused about what many of you guys were talking about. Like, I think for a second, I thought that we were talking about different books. Obviously, this book has its good and bad sides, and that's something that I will comment later on in the video. But I think some of you guys really did not understand this book at all. And some of you guys are very, very confused about what is actually going on in here. Because, like, some of you guys were saying that, like, oh, the end is shit, the end is this, the end is that. Like, I don't understand why Richard did this. I don't understand why Oliver did that. Just read the fucking book. And if you guys don't understand what is going on, like, I recommend you to do some research on Shakespeare first and then read the book again, because you guys are very, very confused. First of all, I have to say that I brought my notes over here, just because there are a lot of characters. There's a lot that I want to talk about. I will just put it over here around my video. But yeah, if you see me looking over here, it's because I have my laptop, and I just need to show my notes, okay? But yeah, the first thing that I have to say is that if you have ever read anything about Shakespeare, or if you have any idea about classical literature in general, there will always be very, very specific roles, especially for Shakespeare in general. He always created his plays or his literature in general, his art, regarding very, very specific roles that taught people things. Like, they basically, his main point was to teach people lessons, and also to convey everything that was happening politically and historically at that time into his plays, to make things relatable. That's why Shakespeare is so important, especially for historians. For example, you can't really talk about history at that time without talking about Shakespeare, because he really had a lot of power. So yeah, take into account that Shakespeare, the main roles, or like the main characters that he writes, or the things that he always writes about, are there's always a hero, or there's always usually, yeah, there's always a hero, there's always a tyrant, there's always a femme fatale, a trickster, and then there's always an ingenue. Okay, there's always these 5 roles that you will always find them over there, right? And then we also have the fallen hero, and then we have the loyalist, which is another character. So there's usually 7 roles. Okay, there's more, but the ones that I see in this book are these 7, right? So obviously each character falls into these 7 roles. Okay, let's start talking about this. Like, I will find it over here, please. I will put a summary or a croquis around here, just so we can keep track on these things. But yeah, please, if you don't understand something, please leave it in the comments and we can talk about it. So starting with Richard, obviously, because he seems to be the main character. Even though we follow the story of Oliver, I would say that Richard is also the main character, or one of the main characters. So Richard, very obviously, is the tyrant. The tyrant is the kind of character where usually you see this person get into power, or having power already, and just using it for evil, right? Just using it in order to either obtain more power, or to make sure that other people don't come into power and snatch the power that the character has already, right? Which is something that we see in Richard. He always plays the villain, the evil type of person, or the evil type of role, and then along the lines we see how Richard becomes the tyrant himself, right? And then at the start of the book we see a class, well, we see literally one of the sessions that the students have with Gwendolyn, where they talk about their own insecurities, and we see that Richard, for example, he says, or he mentions, that he is afraid of being ordinary. So it is very clear that Richard, as a character or as a person himself, he really becomes a tyrant, in the sense of he wants the power, he wants to be something, he doesn't want to be ordinary, he wants to be all above everyone else, right? So that is why he is a tyrant. Then we have Meredith, who is this sexy, very, very sensual woman. I think she's also one of the main characters, I would say. Maybe secondary, yeah. So she's a very sensual, very sexy kind of woman. She's very, very conventionally attractive. She's also very rich. And like the way that she behaves and the way that she enters in the room, she's the kind of person that is like, you will always have her, like you will always have the attention on her when she comes into the room, right? And like this is something that we see in Oliver, like that he always talks about, not only because he has feelings for her as well, but also because that's something that like he sees on everyone else behaving towards her. So basically every time she comes into the room, all the guys, all the girls, everyone is just like over there looking at her, or like trying to interact with her. And also at the same time, I think this is why Richard is also quite jealous. Well, first of all, I think this is why Richard is dating her, because I know like it should, like the fact that he's dating Meredith gives him power as well, not only power over her, but also power and status in general, right? Because he's like, oh, he's the one that is dating Meredith, who is dating like the vixen kind of girl, right? So Meredith, she is obviously the femme fatale, right? So Meredith, she is the femme fatale. She is the one that obviously she is very powerful. She's very strong. She is the kind of character that uses her body uses her influence to manipulate people. Those are the characters that she is very used to play, right? And that is something that we see all along the lines. Then we have Alexander, who plays the trickster. So basically, the kind of character that is always used as comedic relief, or the kind of person that is like, he's always joking around and always playing and always like not being serious. But then we find along the way that he is actually quite serious, and he's actually talking about very specific topics that go along the story, or go along the history of that time, right? So, for example, I would say it would be like a buffoon, right? Like the kind of character that is like, oh, I'm actually like, I'm here making everyone laugh, but actually, I'm just talking about the political issues that is happening around this court, right? Like that is how I would see Alexander. Then we have Ren, who is Richard's cousin. She plays the ingenue type of roles. So like the kind of woman that is very morally sound, who always is there to support people, and like who is used as moral compass, right? Like what we should do, what is right for us to do. Then we have Philippa, who is called the loyalist, and it's basically someone, literally the perfect example of a supporting character, right? So that the kind of person who will always be by your side, who will always love you no matter what happens. She will always be there to support you. And then we have Oliver and James. So Oliver, obviously the main character, he is the tragic hero. He is the kind of person that is very conflicted about his own struggles or around what is happening around him. But he always tries to be the good person. He always tries to be the best as he can. But at the end of the day, he ends up getting injured, or he ends up just getting the consequences of his own actions. And then James is the fallen hero, which is basically someone that becomes a hero for good intentions but ends up becoming evil. And it makes a lot of sense that all these characters have these very specific roles, because how I mentioned before, when they have a class with Gwendolyn, we see that all the characters' insecurities actually really, really match with the roles that they have. So obviously we talked about Richard saying that he's afraid of being ordinary. Then we have Meredith, who talks that she always mentions that she's afraid of being irrelevant or feeling irrelevant. That's why she uses her own sexuality or attraction, or what other people feel with her or about her, in order to get the attention and to be relevant. Then we have Alexander, who says that he is afraid of feeling trapped or not feeling in control of his own destiny. That's why he is a trickster, because even though he doesn't have the control to basically manage around the situation or manage fate or destiny, he still is talking about all the issues and all the moral imbalance that there's around, right? Then we have Ren, for example, who says that she's afraid of being alone. That's why she's the ingenue. She's someone who is very, very agreeable and just says everything or says whatever in order to make sure that she's accepted. Then we have Philippa, who mentions that she's afraid of being vulnerable. That's why she's the loyalist, because whilst other people have problems, right? If there's a drama around, people don't really care about you. They just care about solving the drama. That's why she always supports the team, is always there to help other people. So she is not actually solving her problems, or people actually paying attention to her problems, because they are really busy solving their own issues, basically. And then we have Oliver. I will start with Oliver first. He is afraid that he will never be good enough, he says, I'm afraid I will never be as good as the rest of you. And that is something that we see all along the line. Obviously, he mentions that he's not as talented as everyone else, obviously because he doesn't get main roles, as he says, or because he really loves his other friends. And we see all the time that he has this savior complex, right? Not like Philippa, but in the sense of, you guys are so good, you guys are so great, I am not. So I need to show that I am good in a certain other way, right? Which is, I would just pay for the sins, I would just pay for everyone else's consequences, and I would just go to prison just so I can be the hero, just I can show you guys that I'm actually good and I'm better than you guys, right? And then we have James, who says, I'm afraid of letting people down. And that is such a classic, tragic, fallen hero kind of role, which is, there's so many expectations of this person, and there's so much that people see in him, as not only as a character but also as a person, that he has the need of doing, of being proactive, of becoming the leader, and then ends up getting the physical and psychological effects of on that. Taking into account that all the characters, so all the people, so Meredith, Richard, Warren, Philippa, all of them, they actually have played these type of roles so many times, and they are so afraid of their own insecurities that it's just like, it just makes sense that they get stuck into these roles, and also that they become these roles, because we see all along the line, for example, that Meredith is only seen and portrayed as this femme fatale, sexy succubus, vixen kind of character. She, every time Oliver talks about her, he talks like, he sexualizes her, and he just sees her as something sexual, something that he feels attracted to. Or for example, James, when we see James, or when James is walking around or doing things, we see how he really, really tries to be the kind of person that people want him to be. He has these expectations that after Richard passes away, he will become the leader, and he will be what Richard never was, which was a good leader. But then, obviously, at the end of the book, please spoilers, at the end of the book, we find out that James was actually the one that killed Richard, and he is the one that, after everything that happened, and after keeping these secrets for so long, that he just gets all these emotional reactions and all these physical and psychological effects that actually really, really ruin him. So he is not ready to be the tyrant, which is the leader of the group. He is not ready to be Richard, and he will never be. Then obviously we find Alexander, who is the trickster, who is the kind of guy that is like, hee hee ha ha, this is so funny, I'm literally just a buffoon, right? Like, I'm just stupid. I'm just a gay guy that is funny. But then along the lines, along the plot, we find out that he actually has drug substance abuse issues, and basically he portrays how in the acting world, or like the arts world in general, there's huge issues with alcoholism and substance abuse in general, and how the pressure of actually performing well, of actually being able to graduate in such an important and difficult school to graduate in, you just need to do something around drugs, or you need to be either very, very extremely talented, or you need to put your body down the line, put your emotional and just yourself down the line, and your health, to make sure that you graduate, which is something that Alexander portrays, right? As well as how accepted and how common it is for people within the arts to actually be addicted to some sort of drug or substance in general. Then we also have Ren, who obviously she's the ingenue, she's the moral compass, and we find ourselves how everything that Ren says, everything that that is in regards morality, everyone just looks at Ren and thinks of Ren as a way to decide what to do. And then We have obviously Oliver as well. Well, we have like all the characters. It's just, I think the main point of this book is that each character becomes the role that they have played for so long. They just become, for example, Ren playing Ingenuous, even though she wants to be or she wants to play other different kinds of characters, she becomes the ingenue. Or Meredith, she becomes this femme fatale, sexy girl, right? So at the end of the day, it's like all the characters just end up becoming what they have played. And now, finally, we have my opinion about the book. Obviously, there are things I liked, there are things I loved, there are things that I disliked, there are things that I think didn't make sense. Overall, I have to say that I quite liked this book. It was okay. It was good. I would say 3.5 out of 5, more or less. Yeah, I would give it like a 7 out of 10, something like that. The things I liked or loved are obviously making the plot a Shakespearean tragedy at the end of the day. Like, obviously, because the characters become the roles that they play or becomes the characters that they actually play, I think it just makes this big a modern twist in Shakespearean tragedies, which I think is A, really smart, and B, I think is really great. It's something that I haven't really seen. Obviously, there might be thousands of examples, but I don't know them. If you do, please put it in the comments. I would love to read more of these kind of books. I think they are really good. So yeah, I think that's what I loved the most about this book, the fact that this becomes a Shakespearean tragedy. Then something that I also really liked was the fact that the villain is not Richard, is actually James. Obviously, he is the one that killed Richard. He is the one that, maybe because he wanted to save the rest of the group, maybe because of his own internal ambitions, or maybe because he just was a dickhead, he decided to kill Richard instead of actually going through the normal way, right? Obviously, we say that it was an accident and that Richard was very erratic and it was technically in self-defense. Still, at the end of the day, he killed someone, and he doesn't get any repercussions because he manipulates people so well and he creates such a great environment around him that no one actually knows what happened, and no one actually expected James to actually be the killer, right? And everyone seems to be enamored with James. So at the end of the day, even though Meredith is the sexy kind of girl and like everyone is in love with her, or at least that's what Oliver says, I would say that the actual villain and the person that is actually the hero and is actually the one that everyone is obsessed with is James. Like, one way or another. For example, we see Richard hating on James because he knows that Meredith has some sort of attraction towards James, just because even though James is attracted to Meredith, he doesn't want to do anything about it because he loves Oliver. And first of all, that queer plot twist was amazing. I thought it was great. Also, we see how Oliver is in love with James as well for some reason. So yeah, I think it was really, really great the way that James spread his fingers like and controlled everyone like puppets. Like, even though he killed someone, even though he did all these horrible things about like towards other people and towards anything and everything in order to save himself from the trouble, he literally put Oliver in prison. Even though Oliver says, please don't mention or please don't talk about me, like you being the killer and not me, he still left him on prison. He still left him to rot for 10 years. That like intrinsically makes you a villain. That makes you a shitty person at the end of the day. So James is actually the villain and the characters still love him at the end of the day. I think that was cool. I think that was amazing. That was genuinely one of the best parts of the book. Now, things I did not like or I didn't like as much. I have to say that there's only one thing, and well, there's two, but the second one is quite irrelevant. But the main thing is that I think the characters were incredibly unrealistic. Obviously, I loved the idea, but I think the execution of certain specific characters I think it wasn't great. The first thing is Meredith. Meredith really, really fucking pissed me off. She is the femme fatale. Like, you cannot tell me that you put Meredith as the femme fatale, the one that is like the sexy character that has everyone around her fingers, and like they would eat from her hand, or like they would lick the bits if she asked. And you tell me that she has no repercussions whatsoever, or like she has no play or no saying into the book, or like literally she just was a straight line of absolutely nothing. Like, are you joking? This is not the femme fatale. This is just a sex doll. Like, this is the sex doll role. Like, you cannot tell me that she is a Lady Macbeth type of person. And A, she is not the one that kills Richard, who is the tyrant. B, she has no connection whatsoever with their death, at least that I understood, right? And three, like, she just ends up being like somewhat famous, even though she is so attractive and she could use it to her power. Like, it just doesn't make sense that she is the femme fatale, but she is only the femme fatale because she's hot, not because she's manipulative or not because she's intelligent. She's just hot, basically. That pissed me off. Also, something that really, really upset me was Ren. Obviously, she is the ingenue. She is the kind of character that's like very soft spoken, very like, she's the ingenue at the end of the day. But like, you first say that she is scared, or like she's afraid of being alone, and then after Richard dies, she is absolutely completely forgotten. She is just doing her own thing, being alone, which A, she's afraid of, and second, like, she is the ingenue, and she should be the moral compass, right? But then you actually make her do things that are wrong, or things that are not morally acceptable, and she is the one that is okay with everyone just letting Richard die, even though it's actually her family. That just makes no fucking sense. Like, please riddle me this. How are you letting your cousin die over there? Are you joking? Like, I don't care how much I hate someone, I would never let them die. And like, taking into account that Richard was like, he was done for, right? Like, he was barely conscious. One eye socket was gone. All his bones were broken. You're telling me that you are scared that he will come, like, literally months down the line and just kill you? Are you joking? He's fucking crippled. He's not gonna do anything to you. And then Richard. Don't get me started with Richard. Like, I do understand that he's a tyrant, and I know that it makes sense for him to be the tyrant, taking into account his personality. But how, like, first of all, how are you're telling me that he is the tyrant, but he is like, we don't see the Richard before him becoming the tyrant, right? Like, he is just like a disgusting person from the get-go. Like, we see him like in page 40 or like in page 30, literally like, hey, we see him being a dickhead. Like, you're telling me that he is like the kind of leader that like everyone either loves or hates. But like, I haven't seen someone that loved Richard. They all hate him. I mean, to be fair, it makes sense that they hate him because he's a dickhead, but like, we don't see the good parts of Richard. We just see him like straight up becoming a tyrant, straight up being a tyrant. I'm so sorry, but like, if you start like the story out of nowhere with him being so like erratic, so aggressive, so violent, even towards Meredith and his own cousin Ren, like, you're telling me that like, has he been like that for 4 years? How are you tolerating it? Or like it doesn't just make sense that you guys don't go, like, the characters don't go to the teachers, go to Frederick, go to Gwendolyn or whoever, and they say like, look, this is actually happening. Like, this is really, really scary. We don't know what is going on. If you love Richard so much that you feel so guilty about you killing someone, like, surely, like, if you feel so guilty because you love him so much, surely you will understand that he is erratic because he probably has like mental issues himself. So instead of actually being like, oh, he is a dickhead because he hit me, or like he is making bruises on me, or like he is actually like telling me that he's gonna kill me, you go to the teachers and you're like the Richard that we love and we care about, there's something that is happening to him. We see that he's becoming erratic, that he's becoming violent. This is the proof. Like, I have bruises around my body that show that Richard has been really, really violent. We don't know what is happening. Please help us out. Like, that is so easy. Or like, it's also so easy to, when you see, like, when the characters see Richard in the lake, to actually take him out, call the ambulance and be like, something has happened, we don't know what is going on. And then after some months, like after the months of recovery or whatever, he has also gotten psychologically evaluated and actually gotten the help to become Richard again and not become the tyrant, or like stop being the tyrant. Or B, you have graduated and then you can go separately way, like your separate ways. I don't understand why you guys think that murder was the best option. I genuinely do not understand why. Maybe it was because James actually manipulated Philippa into making sure that she into making sure that both of them actually made everyone else agree into Richard being dead, maybe. And I think that would be really cool. But in general, it just doesn't make sense that everyone accepts that Richard has to die in like such an easy way. Like, it just doesn't make sense, taking into account how much you love him and how guilty you feel by actually let him left for that, basically. So yeah, overall, I would say that there are great things about this book. There are also not so great things about this book. It just depends on what you prefer or what other things that you enjoy. If you are a classical person, like a classical literature kind of person, or you love Shakespeare, for example, I would say that you could really like this book, depending on, obviously. I would say that it was okay. It was actually quite good. Yeah, again, 3.5 stars out of 5, or 6, 7 out of 10. I think it was okay. Not great. This is obviously not how would I say? I don't think this is like the best story ever, but I would say this is something that kept me entertained and that I definitely wanted to finish, and I don't think it dragged down. It was just good. Yep, overall good. That was all for today. Thank you so much, guys, for watching this video. If you have read the book, please, and you have obviously some opinions, please comment down below or go into my social media, and I will be, as always, happy to talk about it. At the same time, please leave a comment or like this video or subscribe if you want. There's some other videos that you can watch on my channel. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Okay, bye, guys.